Hello, Zoom Lizelle. Hello. You can hear me. Awesome. Okay. It's a good thing.
Good afternoon. I will call the meeting to order, and I will start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced the stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all the original people across Turtle Island. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature of thereof? None? Okay, I see none. Can I get somebody to adopt the minutes, please? Okay, Cynthia. Okay, thank you. And okay, so those will be carried over. And then D, items for consideration. So I see none here, but we would like to acknowledge Julie Salchuk, who is visiting us via Zoom. So welcome, Julie. I would like to just provide some information and some background on Julie. Julie is an international speaker, best-selling author, and founder of Salchuk Accessible Solutions.
Can I go ahead and test my screen share?
Sure, yes, absolutely. Julie is committed to helping simplify accessibility. After sustaining a spinal cord injury in 2015, Julie became intimately aware of the everyday challenges of living in a world not built with accessibility in mind. Since then, she has become an industry leader, helping stakeholders understand how accessible spaces and services maximize safety.
Do that little test and see if you could see that.
No, nothing yet. Can you hear us, Julie? Julie, can you hear us? No. Is there someone in IT? Okay.
Were you able to see my screen share?
We can't see it. Can you hear us?
I can hear you,
You
yeah?
can hear us, okay. No, nothing yet on the screen.
Okay, let me try again. I'll
Sure.
just do it again right now.
Okay, it was just, yep, now we can see it.
Perfect. All right. So just let me know when you're ready to roll.
Sure, we're ready.
Yeah, you ready?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, great. So can you just tell me how we're set up? Like, is there a room full of people, or because I only see Joanna and then I see your LaSalle logo.
Yes, so we do have some administration, and our police chief is here, and some some accessibility members that are present as well.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks everybody. I will get started then. My name is Julie Sawchuk. I think I have met some of you maybe last year when I was down Windsor Way. I am coming to you from my home office today in Blythe, which is about an hour and a half north of London. And I thank you for being here, and I'm excited to share some of my thinking about accessibility in our communities and some of the things that we need to think about from a municipal perspective. That's where I'm coming from today. I am also a member of my own accessibility advisory committee here in Huron County. So I bring that into the work that I do as an accessibility consultant as well. So we'll get started. When I talk about accessibility, what I really try to do is help everybody sort of dispel some of the myths and eliminate the fear that seems to be attached to the word accessibility, the thought about making spaces more accessible. And that's our overall goal for today. So the things that I'm going to run through, here's a little agenda. I'm going to tell you my story. Some of you will have heard that before. We're going to talk about the goals of accessibility. The most important part about understanding about accessibility is the why, and understanding the why. We're going to go through what the roles are of different levels of government, different people involved in government operations. We're going to talk about 2025, and we're going to talk about what some of the opportunities are for creating wins in accessibility. So the short version of my story is I used to be a high school teacher, and I was a coach. I was the teacher on the literacy committee. I was very active in being outside and being a role model for my students and fitness and whatnot. And it was a part of my life being outside. So this picture here is me on my, it's actually my brother's fat tire bike. We're on a beach, we're on a holiday. And this was me. I was on two wheels on my bike whenever I had an opportunity to do that. Swim, ski, hike, rock climb, all that, all the good outdoor stuff. And when I was 41, I was training to do a triathlon, and I was on a training ride, and I was hit by a car. And this is my bike after having been hit by a car. You can see it's a little bit bent out of shape, and it's actually in better shape than I was because I got thrown into the ditch, and the biggest damage that was done to my body occurred in my spine, where a bone fragment shot from my T4 vertebrae into my spinal column, and it caused a spinal cord injury. So I have T4 paraplegia, incomplete paraplegia. So that means basically from bra line down. I have.
Excuse me, Julie, I'm sorry. Can you share your screen because we don't see any pictures?
What? Why is it not sharing? Thank you for speaking up, because that would have been a really long, boring presentation of me just talking. Okay, back to here. This is my bike when I was hit. And the damage that was done was permanent. Medical science has not figured out a way to repair damage done to the nerves. So I became a wheelchair user. I went from using 2 wheels to 4 wheels in the blink of an eye. I had no choice in the matter. And I joined the world's largest minority community, and that is people with disabilities. I spent 3 months in rehab in Parkwood Hospital in London, learning how to live with this new body. And all the while I was coming home, I knew I was coming home to this house. This is my 2-story, 115-year-old farmhouse on 10 acres with a gravel driveway. Like the definition of not accessible. We did what we could to make that work while we figured out what was next. And for us, what was next was building a new house. And this picture shows that new house. It is a single story, no upstairs, no downstairs, everything designed from a universal perspective, which meant it worked for me as well as my family members, my husband and my 2 kids that are now 21 and 18. And then I came back into the community, and this was the biggest shock to me, actually, was coming out into the community and realizing how we don't build our spaces with disability in mind. And this picture shows me at the end of a trail where the trail actually continued down and along the river, but this is as far as I could go. This is a kind of like a viewing platform, I guess you would say. And the rails is in front of me are like both a metaphor, analogy, and an actual reality of the barriers that people with disabilities run into every time they leave their house, and even within their own houses sometimes as well. So I started talking about accessibility when I was out in the community, and talking about it from the perspective of like getting curious. Why are things the way they are? Why do we build things the way we do? Buildings, outdoor spaces, all of that. And people started listening. So I started talking more, and I started writing books. And I wrote a book about building my house. I wrote a book about how to recover from a spinal cord injury. And then my latest is building better bathrooms. And that is connecting real stories with the details you need for truly accessible results. And that book has been the most helpful tool for people who are in the design, construction, renovation, planning, building officials, everybody who's generally looking at the building code, but not necessarily being told the whys. And that's why we wrote Building Better Bathrooms, because it explains the details of how a bathroom gets used by a person who requires the accessibility features within it. And this is my favorite thing to do. I'm here hanging out with Mike Rolfe. He's the middle man in the picture here with the white hard hat on, holding a grab bar. And we're at the South Huron Recreation Center, where they were doing a really big renovation, a big addition, 6 new change rooms. And somebody in your audience asked about role models and places that are doing things well. And I would suggest you get in touch with Mike. He's the chief building official there at South Huron, and talk to him about the process of doing this renovation, because they really knocked it out of the park with this whole project, and they are leading the way. So Mike had been consulting with me on this project over the year and a half that it was going on, and he called me up and he said, "Okay, Julie, we're ready to put up the grab bars. Can you come and help?" And so I did, and I talked them through the why, because where they wanted to put it wasn't where it really needed to go, and I was really glad that I was there that day. Being on the ground and in the space and with the people who are doing the work, that is where the really golden conversations happen. So, as an AAC, if you can get yourself into a position where you are face to face in the space, talking to the people who are doing the work or making plans or whatever is happening, to explain from the perspective of lived experience, that's what really helps. That's what really makes the difference. So some of the clients that I've had over the past 8 years, the Marriott Hotel chain in the Ottawa area, Toyota, Clarington made a really big distribution facility in Clarington, and they designed it not just because it was the right thing to do, but because they knew that they had the potential to offer employment for people with disabilities, and had the ground up infrastructure that would allow them to do that. The Federal Bridge Corporation, I've gone through all of their buildings. McDonald's here in my area and Huron and Perth. Dyson, helping them explain the whys of the height of a hand dryer in an accessible washroom. The Honda facility, Ottawa International Airport, which is actually where Building Better Bathrooms was born, the City of Vaughan, and the province of Ontario. And I don't work for the province, but I am chairing the review of the design of public spaces under the AODA. And I'll talk a little bit about that more. Pretty exciting to be called up by the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility and be asked to be in that position of making change. So when I talk about accessibility, the analogy that I like to use is this of the three-legged milking stool, and where the three legs of the stool are safety, independence, and dignity. And if you can think about what it feels like to sit on a three-legged stool and then have like half of one of those legs taken away, so you're now sitting on like 2.5 legs, the feeling that comes with that, I want you to just sort of conjure that up in your mind. And I'm guessing that some of you would say, unsteady, perhaps fearful, unsure, unbalanced, having to like think about what's going to happen if you fall off the stool. What are some things that you could hold on to help you balance on the stool? And that's what happens when we don't achieve accessibility, because we've sacrificed safety or independence or dignity or some of all of those things. And it creates a space where we have to have a plan B. We have to have something in mind where, we have to do it differently, or we don't do it at all. And all of those things consume energy. They consume physical energy and they consume mental energy, whether that's emotional or, the whole plan B running in the back of your head. And it all adds up to energy. So the battery that you see here on the screen, or the 4 batteries here, think about your cell phone or your laptop, and you're trying to get something done and your battery is running out. What do? Well, you run and grab your charger and you plug it in. And that is, that's a pretty easy task to accomplish. Think of now your body being like that laptop or that cell phone, where you can't actually plug it in. You might be able to, I thought I had that on mute. You might be able to like lay down and have a nap, but that isn't a reality for most people on the average day. So being able to keep your battery for as full for as long as possible is really the ideal situation. And when we are fighting against our environment because it is not accessible, we are draining our battery faster than we have the ability to recharge it. So when we create accessible spaces, we actually preserve that energy. So the picture I have on the screen here, and I'm looking for a little bit of audience participation, is that of a plate of Caesar salad. So I am just gonna stop sharing my screen for a second, just so that I can like sort of see you, even though I can't necessarily see you. Um, is it possible for people to speak up or put stuff in the chat, or maybe you could put some things in the chat while I'm asking these questions? Is there an opportunity for that?
Sure. So if anyone has any questions or comments, they can put it in the chat or just raise your
Yeah,
hand and I'll acknowledge you.
that would be great. Yeah. So okay, I'd like you to think about going home tonight with a plan for supper, and that supper involves making a Caesar salad from scratch. So you go to the grocery store, and what are the things that you're going to need to put in your basket? So if people could just like shout some things out, or you could drop them in the chat, what are the key ingredients you need to make that Caesar salad?
Go ahead, Dale.
I like croutons, nice and crunchy.
Yes, absolutely.
Lettuce.
Thank you, Owen. Yeah, what kind of lettuce are we looking for?
Romaine.
Yes. Not kale, not mixed greens. We want romaine. Yeah, we're gonna have romaine. What else do we need for this this salad?
Dressing?
We're gonna make it from scratch. So we need olive oil, garlic, an egg, a little bit of mustard powder.
Parmesan cheese.
Thank you, Parmesan cheese. Awesome. Okay. Maybe we're gonna get some bacon bits or some chicken to put on top, whatever. But the main ingredient that we need is that romaine. So when you go into the grocery store, you go in and those magic doors, they just slide right open, right? Don't you love grocery store doors? Automatic sliders. I roll right in. I grab a basket. I put it on my lap. You might grab a shopping cart, and off you go into the produce section. And that's the first place you go. It's like they direct you there, right? It's a plan. And so you're going and you're looking for the romaine. Maybe you're going to grab a lemon while you're there as well. And you're looking for the romaine and you don't see it. You're like, okay, this is weird. Where's the romaine? You grab a lemon. You keep walking. Maybe you find the olive oil. You find some garlic. You go into the dairy section. You're still looking everywhere. You find the Parmesan cheese. You circle back. And there you see it. You grab the croutons, and way up on top of where the croutons are, top shelf, that's where the romaine is. And I'm talking like top shelf, overstock shelf. So again, if you can just like say a couple of words, what is your first reaction when you see the romaine on that overstock shelf?
Frustration.
Definitely.
Ask for help.
Yeah, is someone around to retrieve it? You're gonna ask for help. If you think about the very first reaction, it usually involves a swear word when it's me. So that's where I go, right? I get frustrated and I think, okay, what am I gonna do, right? How am I gonna solve this problem? Somebody suggested asking for help. What are some other ways you could accomplish getting that romaine and putting it in your basket?
Climb the shelf.
Climbing. Thank you. There's always a climber in the room. Good. So we've asked for help. We've somebody's climbing. What else? What are some other options to deal with this lettuce problem?
I'm going to take something and throw it up there at the lettuce, and hopefully one falls
Okay.
down.
Yeah. So you're like developing a tool, right? Okay. What else? Other solutions?
Look for a tall person.
Random stranger? Yep. I had to ask a random stranger for some help last week. Is it a comfortable thing to do to ask a random stranger for help?
Not always.
Not always, yeah. And what about, would anybody decide to like forget it and order pizza or go to a different store? Any head nods around the room there? I'm guessing so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Would anybody seek out the manager and say, hello, what is with the lettuce on the top shelf? Anybody doing that?
Yes, most of us probably would.
Yeah? Okay. All right. So we've put ourselves in danger by climbing the shelves. We have made ourselves uncomfortable by having to ask random strangers. We may have quit and decided to order pizza. And we may be seeking out the manager and challenging the system. So now, take that Caesar salad and make that your task every time you leave the house. You have to ask for help. You have to develop a tool. You have to decide to go somewhere else. You have to challenge the system. Show of hands, is that a tiring proposition? Every time you leave the house, every time you want to do something, that thing is challenging. That's where our energy goes when we are dealing with an environment or a service that's not designed to be accessible. Now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, but I want you to think about how much energy that takes day to day. And it adds up really fast. So accessibility matters, and that's why you guys are here. And I know you guys know this, but I'm going to just reiterate the sort of the 4 key reasons why accessibility matters. A, we've got an aging population in our country, and the longer we live, the more opportunity there is for our bodies to not do what we expect them to do, i.e., we need accessibility. A great proportion of people with disabilities actually have invisible disabilities, and they're not apparent to you, and they might not be discussed on a day-to-day basis, but accessibility will serve people with invisible disabilities as well as people with visible disabilities. People with disabilities have money to spend, disposable income. Me, for example, I vote with my wallet every time I leave the house. Where I go for coffee, where I go for my groceries, where I go to physiotherapy, where I go to ride my bike. This is me on the Goddard to Guelph Rail Trail. I spend my money based on the accessibility. And when you say, well, it doesn't cost money to ride on the G to G, well, I make a donation to the G to G, and I wouldn't make that donation if it weren't something that is accessible. And then sustainability plays a role. It nicely ties in with accessibility because when you design something to be accessible now, you are actually saving from having to do that in the future down the road. So you're actually building it in to be cost saving and saving from an environmental perspective as well, because it's less work that has to be done in the future. Tearing out drywall is a great, easy example to think about. And I throw up this picture. This is me with my friend Chris and my friend Lauren. We're all wheelchair users. And I use this as like the reminder that not all people with disabilities use wheelchairs. It just so happens that I do, and so do my friends, but we are the minority. We're like 8 to 11% of people who identify as having a disability are actual wheelchair users. So it's a pretty small percentage of the whole total population of people with disabilities. So I'm reminding you that that is just a part of it. But the problem is we use that international symbol of accessibility, which is, you know, the little dude in the blue wheelchair. We use that as the symbol to mark anything that is accessible. But it's not just people who are wheelchair users. And I go back to my teaching days as a high school teacher. I really thought I was serving my students with disabilities well in my classroom. I was awesome as being a teacher in my science classroom. But then I look back now after having joined the community of people with disabilities, and I realized that I was trying to treat my students equally instead of with equity. And so the image that you see here on the screen, the top 4 people have all been presented with the same bicycle, but it doesn't work for all of them except for one. And the only person it works for is this average sized woman who's the third over. And the kid, the bike's too big, the tall guy, the bike's too small, and the woman who's a wheelchair user, the bike doesn't work at all. So she can't even interact with the bicycle. But if we provide instead through the lens of equity and we give the people the tool that they need to accomplish the task, we have treated everybody with equity and everybody gets to ride the bike. So if you can remember this image in future and think of the difference between equality and equity, this will help it resonate in your brain again. So let's look at what some of the roles are from, who does what in this country. So from a federal perspective, we've got the federal government responsible for federal employees and federal services from an accessibility perspective, the built environment that is governed by the federal jurisdiction, so things like airports, for example, and any information and communication that comes from the federal government, and procurement, purchasing that happens for federal services. They are responsible for that as well, and programs and services that they provide. And I already mentioned transportation like airports and via rail and those kinds of things. So that's what the federal government is responsible for. And how they do it is through the Accessible Standards Canada, which is relatively new, right? Since 2021, I want to say. The Canadian Standards Association develops standards, accessibility standards like B651 for the built environment. It's kind of like the National Building Code. It's better than the Ontario Building Code, better from an accessibility perspective. And then there's the provincial government, and this is this, racy photo of me getting a mammogram. And the reason why I included this is because this is my local hospital, and I can go to this hospital and get a mammogram done without having to get out of my wheelchair, without having any kerfuffle, and everything, that whole service is accessible. But that is not the case everywhere. And so within the province, there is some discrepancy of what is available from a medical perspective, from an education perspective, from a housing perspective, transportation and infrastructure. The province is responsible for all of those, but they're not all done with equity and communication as well. So how does the province do this? Well, we've got the Ontario Building Code, but we all know that code applies to the year in which the building was built. So the image that you see here is a Main Street shop in my hometown here of Blythe, and it's being renovated. The building was originally built in the early 1900s, and this renovation was done about 5 years ago. So this is classified as a major renovation, and so therefore the whole building had to be brought up to code, current code, not early 1900s code, thank goodness. So they actually installed power door openers, they made a level entrance, they put in an accessible bathroom. That's how the building code can bring something up. Then we've got the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and I'm going to go into much more detail about that in a minute. And that is all governed, the AODA is governed by the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility, but the building code is governed by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So two different ministries governing two different sets of regulations, both of which involve accessibility. So you can see how there might be some conflict or some overlap or some underlap. Underlap's not a word, but you know what I mean. And then we get to our perspective from the county and from the municipalities, the lower tier municipalities within a county. What are they responsible for? Well, they're responsible for any municipally owned and operated infrastructure. The image that you see here is what's been developed by the County of Huron for guidelines for EV charging and making those EV charging stations accessible. So wherever those are being put up in the county or in any of the lower tier municipalities, they are now required to follow these municipal guidelines. They're responsible for making employment accessible for municipal staff, county staff. Any communications that are produced within the county has to be done in accessible formats or available upon request accessible formats, and also in providing customer service. So think libraries, think municipal offices, providing customer service that is accessible for everybody. And how do municipalities do that? Well, just like you're doing right now, you're getting educated. And that is what I see as my reason for being, is to help people understand the whys and the hows. Something that I'm sure your AAC has been involved in is compliance audits. How is this building doing? And what are some things that could be done to make it more accessible for everybody? Many municipalities have their own design standards, or they have what's the polite way of saying rip off and replicate? Anyways, borrowed standards from other larger municipalities that have, you know, a little bit more money to spend on the team to provide them. Like, I know a lot of municipalities use the London Facilities Accessible Design Manual, the City of London, and they use those standards because they're great and they're way better than actual building code. And you have an AAC, and that is, you know, a lot of you that are here are a part of that, involved in educating, involved in doing audits, and helping the county and the municipality in LaSalle meet those standards and exceed those standards. This is my AAC from a few years back here in Huron County. And it's not just us, these volunteers, these, you know, people from the community. It's also the CIO and the clerk that falls under their purview. We have an accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator in the county here as well, the chief building official, and a variety of building inspectors have sort of rotated through being members of the committee. So we're kind of like, every year we get somebody new and we educate them up, and then they go and they spread the word, right? We also have a planner involved, and then all of us community members as AAC members. And then there's also consultants that you can reach out to, and some municipalities will do that. They will hire an outside consulting company to work on a particular project. What about from a private enterprise perspective? So if we shift away from government to private ownership, I've got a picture here of me with Rob Reed. Rob is the owner of the McDonald's here in Huron County, and he's my biggest fan, and I'm his biggest fan. Like, it's totally mutual. I love working with him because he gets it. And he has built 2 brand new McDonald's in our area and done them all way above AODA, way above OBC, because I helped him and because he knew it was the right thing to do, not just from a moralistic perspective, but from an entrepreneurial perspective. He knows that if he builds an accessible McDonald's, he will be able to serve people with disabilities better, and it brings them back. I go back all the time. So who is responsible from a private enterprise perspective? The person who owns the building, or the people, the team who owns the building. If there isn't, if the owner is not the operator, then there has to be some great conversation between the operator and the tenant and the owner, because often changes can't be made without owner permission and all of that kind of thing. So good communication is really key there. And what can a private enterprise do? So they can follow the OBC, or they can do better. And they can follow the AODA. I would suggest they also do better. And on the screen here, what you see is not the mobile ordering, but like the touch screen ordering. So instead of going up to the counter and placing your order, this is where you tap it in and then you go and pick it up. I'm trying to operate it. And eventually I figured it out. I guess I'm just not a tech person. It was definitely accessible, but yeah, my son had to show me how. Anyways, let's talk about 2025, the elephant in the room, so to speak. What is supposed to happen in 2025? And just shout it out. I can't see the chat, so if somebody wants to just shout out what they think is supposed to happen in 2025.
I believe we're, as municipalities and businesses in Ontario, supposed to meet certain accessibility standards across the province.
Yeah, in a nutshell, Ontario is supposed to be completely accessible by 2025. What is it? September? Are we still in September? Yeah. So September, we have October, November, and December. We've got 3 months. How are we doing, everybody? Are we going to meet that goal? I don't think you would be here if we were going to meet that goal. That's why we're here, right? To learn all the opportunities that we still have, because we're not there yet. And there's a bunch of reasons why we're not there yet. One of which is the AODA and the fact that there's really no enforcement. So when we talk about AODA, we're talking about 6, 7 categories. Customer service, I'm going to go into some more detail about each of these. Customer service, information and communication, employment, transportation, and design of public spaces. So 5 different categories within the AODA. Let's look at customer service first. This is Mrs. Cheryl Peach. She, if you're familiar with Cowbell Brewing in Blythe, when the building was getting ready to open, she trained up all the staff, and she had a phenomenal system for helping staff understand how to best serve all clients. Having a customer service counter that was accessible, assistive communication technology, an iPad that had the menu on it that had a screen reader, accessible listening system for tours of the brewery. She trained up the staff. She developed all the policies. She was a rock star for Cowbell, and Cowbell is very well known for how accessible it is, specifically from a customer service perspective, all because of the passion of this one woman. There's also a significant amount of compliance reporting that needs to be done when you have a certain number of staff over 50, not age over 50, number of staff. That's what I'm talking about. And then from an information and communication perspective, here's another Cowbell example. They now have a Braille menu. So is the information accessible in a variety of formats? And the information, things like public safety, feedback processes, like when you visit a place and you have something to say about it, how accessible is that method? Is it a phone call? Is it some weird thing you have to click on their website? Is it accessible? Websites and documents, and any communication supports that's provided as a part of the business or the operations of that facility, they all need to be accessible or available in an accessible format upon request. And a big part of that is awareness training, helping people who work in the facility understand what they have available. For example, to call up a hotel, for me to call up and book a hotel, I will call the front desk and say, I'd like to book a wheelchair accessible room with a roll-in shower. And they say, yep, no problem, we can do that. And then I will specifically ask questions about the shower. And often the people working at the front desk do not know how to answer my questions. And so awareness training becomes such a big part of being able to talk to the community about what you have that is accessible. And then it helps people make decisions for themselves, because you can say your building's accessible, but what does that really mean? And if you haven't trained your staff to understand what that really means, then they're not going to be able to communicate that, and you're going to probably lose out on new business or clientele or whatever it is that you do. Employment is another area under the AODA where hiring practices, workplace information, talent performance and management, and selection, interview processes, all of those things need to be done so that they are accessible. And the photo that you see is of Megan's desk. Megan worked for me for a summer, and she has limited reach range, and she has challenges with her dexterity with her hands. And so she was provided with a desk that allowed her computer to be closer to her to eliminate the amount of reach that was required for her to do her work. And she had a trackball mouse that allowed her to be able to use her computer to make that possible. The average cost for accommodations for employment is approximately $500. So, like, that is not a lot of money to bring in the talent that comes with people with disabilities. So talking about accommodation plans, right? And that's where that all comes down to being open-minded. Transportation. What's public transportation like in LaSalle? Do you have much? I want to say no. Maybe buses?
We do have buses.
You do have buses, okay. So where I am, I have nothing, like no public transportation whatsoever. So this is a picture of me on the TTC in Toronto trying to get back on the subway. And I'm standing here with this guy who's got an e-bike because we both got off on the wrong stop and had no way of getting from the platform up to street level because there was no elevator. And I rolled to one end and there's stairs, and I rolled to the other end and there's stairs, and I'm like, really? Why can I not find the elevator? And then I turned around, and right behind me is this like placard that says, 2026 new elevator being installed at this station. So I was like, 2 years too early or something. And this guy thought the same thing. He thought for sure he'd be able to get up to street level. His bike was too heavy to carry up the stairs. So we both got back on the train, went to the next stop. It wasn't communicated clearly to me as an outsider, not being a Torontonian, that this subway station wasn't actually accessible. So they're also responsible for technical requirements like audio announcements, providing courtesy seating, having accessibility plans, communicating their information. Some do it better than others, let's just say. And then we look at design of public spaces, which is the very last part of the AODA, but perhaps the most relevant for everybody here in the room today, because the design of public spaces is the section that covers everything outside the building code. So from parking to playgrounds, beach access, trails, picnic areas, sidewalks, pedestrian signals, all of that stuff is all covered under design of public spaces. And this is the group of people that I am chairing to kind of level up that those regulations to make them work better. And from a municipal perspective, this is where you folks have the biggest opportunity to make a difference. Instead of following current AODA standards, looking instead at current best practices and aiming for those to make all of these things, parks, playgrounds, trails, boardwalks, beach access, parking, accessible, outdoor eating areas, sidewalks, pedestrian signals, and I've got maintenance thrown in there. I really should put it to the end, because it's all fine and good to have all of these places and spaces that are accessible, but if you're not maintaining the accessibility of those spaces, then they might as well not be in the first place. So that is actually a really easy way to think about these outdoor spaces and making them accessible, is how well are they being maintained. The image here, I have an accessible parking spot that's showing the vertical sign, the sign on the cement, the access aisles. I have since updated this drawing. This is a drawing that I had commissioned by a local artist, friend of mine, who I couldn't find like good drawings of what it meant to be accessible for all of these things. So I created them, and I put them all into one opportunity for people to learn how to make their outdoor spaces more accessible. And this is just one of them. And I would be selling myself short if I didn't talk about bathrooms, because that is my favorite topic. And here I am in a restaurant trying to use the bathroom. You'll notice that there's a toilet to my left, and to my right there's a stall door that swings in. There's also a baby change table in that space. I can't use this bathroom because I can't close the door. I can't get in far enough and close the door because the door swings in. And the quote is from the Retail Council of Canada from 2022. Accessible washrooms should be used as accessible washrooms, not storage rooms. I've seen plants. I've seen Christmas trees. I had one friend tell me that she found a safe in an accessible washroom at a bar. Hat stands, magazine racks, like stacks of chairs. You would be surprised at what people think should go in an accessible stall. Oh, it's just extra space. We'll just put this in here for now. And then that for now becomes, forever. And then the people who need that space can't access it. So if we, in a nutshell, look at who accessibility applies to, it applies to everybody, every level of government, federal, provincial, municipal, lower tier municipal. Every decision that gets made in all of those levels can all be looked at through the lens of accessibility and judged. Is this thing that we are just about to do, is it going to meet the needs of everybody? Every role in every level of government can play a part in making those decisions from an accessibility perspective. And the image that you see here, this is like my favorite place in the world. I'm on the beach on Lake Huron in Goderich, where we've got 3 kilometers of boardwalk and cement access. This is early spring, so they haven't rolled out the beach access mats yet, but right atop of my head, that is where the beach access mat rolls out right to the lake. And there I am, right on the lake. It's phenomenal. And it applies to every person, and everybody gets to do accessibility. Everybody. The image in the background here is me trying to get to the post office this winter, unsuccessfully, literally spinning my tires in the snow because the parking lot was cleared, but not cleared enough so that I could actually wheel in it. And all of those decisions, they often come down to like time. And so, the people doing the snow plowing there in that situation, they did what they were able to do in the time that was allotted to it, which also comes back to budget. So where are some opportunities for wins? You're already doing that by having education as a part of the work that you are doing site reviews, looking at developing and using new standards like B651, for example, or the London's accessible facilities accessible design manuals, and looking at your special event policies. Anybody do Terry Fox run in their local community this past weekend? Some head nods, maybe? I did, and I'm torn about doing it in this particular community where I normally do it because there's no accessible bathroom at the event. And so as a part of the policy for running special events in your community, are you looking at all of the pieces? Are you asking the people who are organizing special events to make sure that everything that they're doing is accessible? And that whole vote with your wallet thing, the reason why I continue to go to that community to do that Terry Fox event is because 2 dear friends of mine run it, both cancer survivors, and I can't not do it. Renovation guidelines, looking at not just the minimum. And from a municipal perspective, how can you provide financial support to all of these things? And budgeting it for it. Don't let it be an afterthought. And finally, like I mentioned off the top, education and training. How many people can I fit in a bathroom? This is what I do every time I go somewhere. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. There's 14 of us in this accessible bathroom. This is in a Toronto space. These are the designers. They built this space, and we toured it together to talk about how it actually was. So in our last little bit, I'm going to take you on a tour of my place. This is Cowbell. I call it my place because I did help with the design when it was happening. It was still a hole in the ground, and I called up the owner and said, hey, how can I help? And they were over the moon excited to have lived experience, join their design team, work with their architects, and make it as awesome as it is. So we're going to go through. Does anybody need to take a break? I think I'm gonna power through if everybody's okay with that.
Yes,
we
you can
haven't quite
continue.
been an hour yet. We're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. So here we are at Cowbell. We're gonna park first, and you'll see at this accessible parking, that's my car on the left. We've got 2 wide transfer aisles between those 2 parking spaces. The one on the right is a designated van accessible parking space. The one beside that is a type opposite of that, the type A. I continuously get them mixed up. Anyways, we've got 2 different types of accessible parking spaces. I think there are 6 in total, all with alternating transfer aisles. So every other parking space has a transfer aisle between it. And you see that the sign is painted on the surface. There's also a side, a crosswalk painted that connects that transfer aisle to the sidewalk directly to the building. And there's a very minimal slope in these accessible parking spaces, which is fabulous. From somebody who's using a wheeled mobility device, twice I have just ever so slightly let go of my chair as I'm pulling it out of the car, and off it sails through the parking lot. Twice that has happened, neither of which has it actually been like hit by a car, which is pretty amazing. Got caught by somebody who just happened to be passing by. Slope has a big impact on parking. And it's also a paved surface, so firm, non-slip surface. Now we have flipped the camera the other way. We are looking at the building. We're coming from that accessible parking area up onto the sidewalk. The exterior path of travel is level and firm. It is cement. There's a tactile warning indicator surface that contrasts well with the sidewalk itself. And there's also some seating in this is the off season, this photo. In this space right here under the shade, there's usually some chairs there. There's a great big sign that tells you, you are here, this is where you need to go in. There's also usually a fountain that sits here, a little bit of an auditory clue that you are in a different space. And again, I mentioned that shade. Something that you don't see that is present here is the heated sidewalk. This is north-facing side of the building. So think of those winter winds coming whipping off the lake, bringing all of that moisture. Having that heated sidewalk is not just a benefit for staff to not have to clear the sidewalk as often. It's great for somebody who's using a mobility device from a safety perspective. They're not bringing the muck and the salt and the snow in on their device or slipping in it or whatever, and it's a win-win for everybody. So that's one of those like invisible accessibility wins. And I talked about the signage already. So here we come into the building, and this just as a just to back up a second, this is how I do an audit. This is how I approach a space. I start at this is how you get here, whether it's by transit or whether it's by walking or whether it's by parking. I start in the parking lot. I look at all the exterior paths of travel, and then I come into the building and I see what's inside the building. So how easy is it to get around in the building? And in the olden days, when Cowbell was first opened, they actually, staff, before people would come through, they would hold a string from the one end of the room all the way down the middle of the tables to the other end of the room to make sure that they were lined up. And then they would measure that between the adjacent rows to make sure that they were maintaining a clear path of travel so that somebody who's using a mobility device has the space to get through all the tables without it being like excuse me, pardon me, could you just pull your chair in for a second? Because that's awkward and tiring. So circulation throughout the horizontal aspect of the building, but also vertically, looking at the stairs and looking at, is there an elevator or a lift mechanism to get to the other floors in the space? And there is here, obviously, at Cowbell. Can you get to all services? Is there access? We had tours in Cowbell pre-COVID where you could actually come in, have a tour of the brewery. There were screens, there was a tour guide, there were headphones that you could wear, there was closed captioning on the screens showing the videos. So, you know, in all of the services that are provided, is it accessible for everybody? And I call this so looking at contrasting elements, people sometimes navigate through a space based on visual contrast. So looking at the railing on the second floor here is black, where the floor and the walls behind are all sort of a light wood color. So is there good color contrast between the elements to help somebody navigate through a space without bumping into something or knowing where they need to go? Lighting and acoustics are always a challenge, especially in a restaurant, especially acoustics. And there have been times when I've been here and I have actually asked for them to turn down the music. It's It's a thing. You can do it. And sometimes people really appreciate when there is less noise. In the bathroom, here we are. How many people are we filling into the bathroom today? I don't know how many people are in your room, so I don't know, maybe we've got 20 people in the cowbell bathroom today. This is like the bee's knees of accessible bathrooms. There's a few things that I would do differently, but there always is. And if you leave with anything today, remember that there is no such thing as perfect. So in this bathroom, we have a tall toilet with an open front seat, a seat lid so that if you need to balance, you can lean against it. There's an L bar on the wall beside the toilet. The sanitary disposal is right there. A fold down grab bar on the transfer side of the toilet, and an emergency call button. I would actually like to see that right about here, right within reach of being able to, if you were on the floor, you should be able to reach the emergency call button because that's where emergencies happen. I love this toilet paper holder because it's got a shelf built into it. So if you have extra supplies while you're using the bathroom, I use catheters, so I always need somewhere to put my little bag. And there I can do it. This big white thing on the wall here, that's an adult size change table. And that is the make or break for a lot of families. Kids with disabilities grow up to be adults with disabilities. And if toileting is done differently than what is traditional, they need somewhere to lie down. And the alternative is, the back of the van or the floor of the bathroom, none of which have dignity attached to them. Hand washing here, the soap is to the left here, just out of the picture, but I can roll up under the sink. I'm not hitting my knees on pipes because they're insulated. The paper towel's right within reach. And then if I do this with my left elbow, I hit the power door opener and the door opens right behind me. So I don't have to use my hands. I don't have to move. Boom. It's brilliant. So I've just gone through all of these, what I call the basic checklist for the ultimate accessible washroom. And this is where you can get this from my website, and I'll drop that into the chat and I'll send it around so that you have it as well. The thing that I didn't talk about here was the visual fire alarm. Code asks for visual fire alarms to be present in universal washrooms, but at this point in time, I don't think, unless it got updated in the most recent changes to the building code, visual fire alarms are not required in multi-stall washrooms. And I think that's a massive miss from a safety perspective, because anybody who is receiving information with their eyes instead of their ears will be looking for a strobe light, and they're not necessarily using the universal washroom. They may be using the multi-stall washroom, so it should be in there as well. Signs is something else that I look at when I'm doing a site tour and giving feedback, looking for color contrast, the use of symbols. Are the symbols and the information tactile, raised? Is there braille? Is it efficient information, or is it like way too much information? Because that happens a lot as well. And for door signs, are they placed on the wall beside the door, not on the door? And this is one of my favorite washroom signs. This is a cowbell washroom sign. They got changed up after they opened to use the toilet symbol. Instead of it being a designated washroom for male or female, the single-use washrooms all got changed to show that this is a room, it has a toilet in it, there's a baby change table, and it's accessible. That's all you need to know. It's great. I love it. Signs for our emergency systems are really helpful as well. These little blade signs above the fire alarm pole and the fire extinguisher. Having evacuation plans, those plans need to be created with people with disabilities. That is what helps people running the building know, okay, somebody with this particular, need, how am I going to get them out of the building? The second floor of Cowbell, that the fire chief there, he would say that elevator is not going to be working, right? So how is Julie going to get out of the building if there's a fire? Guess what? They have an emergency evacuation chair that I can get onto with assistance and get out of the building. Brilliant. Is the signage clear? Oh, there's the evacuation chair. And is there lighting for power outages? That is also an important aspect. Within Cowbell, there are other things. They have a pool table now. They've got like ping pong. They've got that foosball. So are any recreation spaces accessible? Service desks we've talked about. Obviously, there's no residential spaces in Cowbell, but I'm getting on the list of other spaces, right? Maybe you have a pool in a recreation center. Is there service animal relief areas in your space or near your space? Are your exhibits in your museums or your libraries, are they accessible? What about retail and playgrounds, parks, outdoor eating areas, picnics, all that stuff? I'm throwing a lot at you here, folks, and it's okay to not keep up because this is a lot. And as I mentioned before, the icing on the cake from outdoor spaces, or all spaces for that matter, is maintaining the accessibility of those spaces. So this is my favorite place, right? We're in Goderich, we're rolling along the boardwalk, and these two young men I saw pretty much every time I was there this summer, maintaining the accessibility of the boardwalk, picking up garbage, cutting the grass. These guys were there all the time. And here I was rolling past them and I was like, you guys are awesome. Hey, can I take your picture? Because they were like filing down a giant, I guess I want to call it a giant sliver, but it's the wood had lifted a little bit and it was a trip hazard and it was a safety thing. So they were there fixing it up. And so keeping that boardwalk as accessible as it is, having standard practices and following those standard practices, looking at things from a seasonal perspective. And of course, when I say seasonal, I mean snow, right? And are we clearing snow and moving it out of the way, or are we piling it and making it become an obstacle? Unfortunately, accessible parking spaces are often sacrificed in some circumstances in the wintertime as the snow pile. Out of service notification. What is my most recent example of an out of service notification? Oh, going to an event. I believe I was in Owen Sound and I was with my son, and there weren't a lot of the opportunity that I found for a bathroom was a gallery, and it was totally under renovation. But I had like navigated up the ramp and went through the front door and went to the desk, and that was as far as I could get, because to get anywhere else in the gallery, you needed stairs, and the elevator was out of service because it was being maintained. But there were no signs up anywhere that said, accessible, washrooms not available, or elevator out of service. I would have saved all of the energy of rolling up the ramp and going through the doors and finding the service desk if they had just put up a sign. To touch briefly on standards, I've mentioned this already. The B651 is the Accessible Design for the Built Environment National Standard. And then there is the Accessible Dwelling Standard. So if you are building in your area residential accommodations, I really hope that the team who's involved is looking at these standards for developing accessible residential, because what's available for information in the OBC right now is just simply not enough. To talk about OBC for a minute, code is the bare minimum. Accessibility code is the bare minimum, and we can do better. And this is a brand new washroom. And remember how I talked about that emergency call button being within reach of being on the floor? That is not going to cut it. And the irony of this is a hospital. And in this hospital, this is my local hospital, in this hospital during COVID, 3 bathrooms were redone, and all of them are different, and none of them have the emergency call button in a spot that can be reached. So just missed opportunities because code doesn't give enough information. Best practices are not often implemented because they're in this like column on the right hand side, and it's this little bubble of here's something else you could do. It's not a you have to do this. So I challenge everybody to start reading those and seeing that what's provided in those best practices is actually not that hard to do and not that much more money, if any at all. Very few increase the cost of the project. Residential, this is just a quick overview of what barrier-free looks like. This is a brand new condo in Kitchener, and this is the barrier-free unit. And you can see like my forehead and my glasses just in that mirror. I'm touring with the building manager, and I go into this bathroom. It's got a toilet right between the tub and the sink. There's no roll-under space. It's not a roll-in shower. There's no grab bars. And I turned and I looked at her and I said, "Are you sure we're in the right unit?" And she pulls out her map and she says, "Yep, this is the barrier-free unit. It has the wheelchair symbol on it. This is whatever, unit 102. And I was like, oh man, such a miss. Barrier free does not equal accessible. So if you're following OBC from a residential perspective, you're going to miss it. Because what it means is people with disabilities have to sacrifice their own resources to renovate a brand new space to make it work for them. And it's not that hard to do. So what you're seeing here is plans for a housing initiative in Huron County where I worked with a design team to make the kitchen be actually wheelchair accessible and work from a universal perspective. A couple different heights of counter, roll under spaces here under the cooktop, under the sink, some lower height upper shelves, electrical outlets on the front face of the counters so things are with easy reach. Lots of toe space and knee space, some underneath counter spaces as well for storage. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Like this is being done. It's just not being done everywhere. So do your research. And from a municipal perspective, legislate it as a part of development standards. There's the words I was looking for before. Research and replicate, not rip off and replicate.
Julie, I'm
Right?
sorry.
If we,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
We are on a time crunch just because there is a 5
Okay.
PM meeting.
Yep.
But appreciate all of your expertise and knowledge. I just wanted to give some time to the committee to ask any questions if there are any. But we will
Absolutely.
ensure that these slides are shared with the committee and the staff, just so they can complete the slides that you weren't able to share.
Perfect. Yep. And I will stop sharing my screen. Please ask away.
Okay, so at this time, I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge on accessibility as well as your story. We truly appreciate your time. And at this time, I will ask the committee members and administration if they have any questions for Julie.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Hi, Julie. My name is Scott Bisson. I'm the manager of culture and recreation for the town.
Hi.
Hi. So you briefly got a chance to touch on the question that I submitted, and I missed the name of the facility in Huron County.
Yes, it's the South Huron Recreation Complex, and it's in Exeter.
Exeter, okay.
Yep. And if you reach out to Mike Rolfe, he will be happy to talk to you about it. Send me an email. I'll send you the details. I'll connect you guys.
Sounds good. So just one question. So I think you mentioned that it was an addition or a renovation that was done to the facility, and they made the improvements from an accessibility standpoint. Was it a renovation of the entire facility, or was it a new addition? And sort of what I've seen many times, in my time working within this sector is oftentimes there's a renovation to a building or an addition, and the addition or the new part of the building or the renovated part of the building becomes accessible, but the old part of the facility or the part that's not getting the major upgrade sort of remains the same. So I was just curious a little bit more of what they did.
Yeah, it was actually a little bit of both. So the arena, the ice surface wasn't touched. The stands were not touched. There was a whole new addition of a wing of 6 change rooms, and they were all made to be accessible. The referees' rooms, again, were a part of that addition as well, so they were also accessible. The lobby was renovated, so the lobby was leveled up to current standards, And then the community room where like events were held, buck and does, that kind of thing, that remained the same. But the washrooms, there were 2 washrooms that were installed to be accessible, sort of between the lobby and that community space. So it was a little bit of both. Some of the old spaces, like just the big rooms and the arena, they were left as is, but everything feeding those spaces was leveled up to be accessible, including the parking lot. Parking lot's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Julie? Okay, I'm not seeing any. But again, I wanted to thank you very much on behalf of the committee for your time. We really appreciate your education and your sharing your story with us. So thank you again.
You're most welcome. Thanks everybody for coming. Reach out if you have any questions or you want some more information, and I will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so that leads me to our next meeting date is scheduled for November 20th at 3:30 p.m. and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for your time.